Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with part 2 of my review of the Hifiman Arya, or some call it the Arya. I'm not absolutely sure which is right, but I think Arya is more common. Anyway, I did the first part of my review, which was just a first impressions a couple days after I received these, and I've now had them about 2 months. And I figured it was about time to do a full review and talk more about the sound, because I didn't really get into that much in the first review, or the first part. Anyway, the Arya is basically kind of a scaled down version of the HE1000 V2. My understanding is it uses a very similar driver design and basically was made as a cheaper alternative to the $3,000 1000 V2. From what I've heard, I have not heard both of them. I've got a lot of hours in on this, but I've never heard the HE1000 V2, so I can't tell you personally how they compare. But I've heard about 4 different people that have heard both tell me that they sound very similar. Okay, but then just today on my headphone group, someone else said that there's a difference between this and the HE1000 V2, that they're not quite the same. So, but 4 out of 5 say they are real close in sound. Anyway, I gave you a pretty good look at the headphone in my first video, but I'll give you another look. It's got the same basic headband design as the HE560 with the sliding adjustments. You've got your head strap here. The yokes on this swivel like on the HE560 and the HE400i. But I believe, I'm not positive, but I believe these yokes are aluminum, like were used on the, what version was that? Oh, I can't even remember right now. But anyway, I think the yokes are aluminum. The grills, I'm not sure if they're plastic or aluminum, but the ear cups are basically plastic. And the ear pads, which are thicker in the back, thinner in the front, not sure. I don't think this is a real leather, but it's a cloth on the inside. They are very, very soft and very comfortable. And as you'll notice, you got a huge space for your ears here. And you've got your standard 3.5 connectors on the bottom. But they do have the swiveling yokes, which I do like a lot. That was the HE560, in my opinion, was more comfortable than the Sandara, which did away with the swiveling yokes. And this has the swiveling yokes, which I really like. I think it's just a more comfortable fit to me. It takes away having too much pressure front or back. And I personally think this is probably, even though this headphone weighs 404 grams, which is not that light, but I personally think it's probably the most comfortable headphone I've ever worn. Before that, I would have said the HE560 was, but the advantage this has is huge ear cups, and I like the fact that I can wear these without them touching my ears at all, and that's just really enjoyable to me, not having anything touching my ears. So anyway, these are rated at 35 ohms of impedance and have a sensitivity of 90 decibels at 1 milliwatt. So that's pretty inefficient, but being only 35 ohms, they're not super hard to drive. So I would say these are relatively hard to drive, but not real hard to drive. They do take some amp behind them to sound good. They are a little bit harder to drive and take a little more power than the Hifiman Sandara or the HE560. I'm sorry, or the HE500, but they're a little bit easier to drive than the HE560, which takes quite a bit of amp to sound good. They'll play loud enough underpowered, but the 560 just doesn't sound, it lacks bass impact, and the treble can get a little harsh if they're underpowered, where these, that's not really a problem. Being underpowered, they still basically sound good, but they do lack a little bit of bass impact when you don't have enough power into them. And these are definitely not intended to be a portable, used with a portable device. I mean, the cable has a 1/4 inch standard 6.3 millimeter stereo plug on it, so this was never intended to be used as a portable, especially being an open back, which usually aren't that popular for portable use anyway. On the other end, you've got your, which is pretty much the Hifiman standard now, your 3.5 millimeter connectors, and a nice cloth covered cable. Nothing exceptional, but it's pretty decent. And it is about 5 feet long. For testing this, I've used 6 different amps in the 2 months I've had this, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a few minutes about which amps work the best with it. But as far as my source, I was using a Cambridge Audio 540C CD player as a source only, and running digital into a Benchmark Media DAC1, and then running my analog signal out of that to the amps. And so I used a pretty good variety of different amps to test this out, and I want to tell you how it worked with each of those. My overall opinion of this headphone is it is an extremely well-balanced headphone. It just really doesn't have any obvious weaknesses. I mean, this headphone, it works with pretty much any kind of music I throw at it, and like I said, there's just nothing really wrong with it. I mean, I'm not saying it's the best headphone in the world or anything like that. There is no best headphone in my opinion. And in fact, that's totally subjective. It depends one person to another. What one person might think is the best headphone ever, another person might not like it all. But anyway, in my opinion, this is probably the most well-balanced, does everything well headphone that I've ever listened to. Like I said, it just has no obvious weaknesses. There's a couple small issues, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But it doesn't matter what kind of music I throw at this. Everything from electronic to dance music to rock works really well with this headphone. Jazz, acoustical, orchestral music all works well. It's just a really rounded headphone that works with kind of pretty much any kind of music. So getting into the sound, I would describe the tone balance of this headphone, and once again, this is subjective and it depends one person to another, but I would describe the tone balance of this headphone, in my opinion, as being pretty much perfect. I wouldn't make any changes to it. If I was asked what I would change about the tone balance of this headphone, I would say nothing. Pretty much every headphone I have used, I've messed around with EQing it a little bit. I've got a shit low-key 4-band equalizer, and I like to play with it and change the sounds a little bit. And this headphone, I'm tempted to use EQ probably less than any other headphone that I've tried. I mean, it just takes it. The only time I would be if the music really needs it. I mean, if a recording is just really lacking in bass or really lacking in treble or something, I might be tempted to EQ it a little bit. But if the recording is good, I really find no need to EQ this headphone at all. As far as the tone of it, first of all, I would say the extension is excellent on both ends. Up until now, probably the headphone that I thought had the best bass extension, that went the lowest, was the Hifiman HE560, and this headphone goes just as low, has just as good of sub bass, but it hits a little bit harder. You would have to boost the bass on the 560 probably about 2 to 3 decibels to be in the same place as it is with the Arya. So excellent bass extension. Everything to me is balanced really well, the entire tone, all the way through the bass, the mids. The mids aren't recessed, they're not too far out front where they're in your face. I mean, they just seem to be in the right place. The treble is well extended. It's got a lot of sparkle to it. It's very clean, it's very sharp and detailed, but I've never felt where it was fatiguing at all. It never came across as harsh, and it never wore me out listening to it. So, in my opinion, excellent treble. The clarity, the resolution, the detail are all excellent on this headphone, in my opinion. It ranks up there at the top of, not the very top, but near the top of any headphone I've heard so far as resolution and detail. Not lacking at all. I mean, anything I listen to, this headphone's going to pull every detail out of it. The Soundstage, which is probably one of the best features of this headphone, well, to an extent. I'll give you my opinion on it. The soundstage on this is very, very wide. It's got a huge soundstage on it, and wider than anything I've heard, but I have not heard the Sennheiser HD 800 or the 800S, which are very well known for having a huge soundstage. Okay, I haven't heard either of those. I was hoping to get one in while I was still reviewing these, but that didn't happen. But compared to anything else, this has a wider and much taller soundstage than anything I've listened to. Okay, it's a little bit wider, but as far as height, and I think it's probably because of the ear cuffs being so, oval shaped and so tall, that the height of the soundstage is incredible. I mean, other headphones I've heard sounded like they're coming from up by the top of my head, but I sometimes hear sounds coming out of this that sound like they're way above the top of my head, all the way down, down here somewhere. So probably more height to the soundstage than any other headphone I've heard. Great width. As far as the depth though, that is pretty much the only weakness I can find with this headphone. It does lack a little bit of depth. I mean, it does have some depth to the soundstage, but not a lot. I don't hear things that sound way out in front of me. So, great height, really good width of the soundstage, but not the most depth I've ever heard. The dynamics of this headphone, I kind of changed my opinion as I was going through my 2 months I've had with this. And I found out that what it is, it really depends on the amp. Okay, this headphone isn't really that demanding of an amp. Like I said, it takes a fair amount of power to sound right. If an amp isn't putting out enough power to back up this headphone, the first thing it loses is dynamics. It doesn't really seem to change the tone balance that much. The sound of the headphone, the soundstage, everything is still good if it's underpowered, but it lacks some dynamics. And so with a less powerful amp, and I'm talking desktop amps, not portables here. With a less powerful amp, it has kind of a soft sound. It still sounds good. It's just kind of a more mellow, softer sound with a little less slam to it. Where if this is hooked up to an amp that has a lot of power behind it and backing it up, it's actually a pretty dynamic headphone. It's not really lacking at all. It's got a lot of slam, especially in the mid bass and like the upper bass, like snare drums and things. Has a pretty good hit to it, but it needs a little bit of power behind it, and I'll get into that in a minute, what I would actually recommend power-wise. Okay, during the time I've had this, I've had 6 different amps that I could use to test this on. First would be the Benchmark HPA2, which is built into my Benchmark Deck 1. I've got the Audio GD Master 9, which is my primary amp for testing headphones. I've got the Emotiva A100 Bass X, which I've had, that was one of my first amps, and I've tried it both with the jumpers installed and not installed with this headphone. The Wells Audio Milo, which works, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. The Urzatish Bacillus Tilia, and last of all, and the amp I've only had a couple weeks now, would be the Felix Audio Echo. So I'll just go through the list. The Benchmark, which is built into all the Benchmark decks. Well, you can't get them without it, but anyway, it's a very clean, detailed amp, and it's rated at 1.25 watts into 32 ohms, and it does a real good job with this headphone. Very clean, very detailed sound. And I would say power-wise, that's probably about what I would recommend. That amp is rated at 1.25 watts, and I would say that is about what this headphone needs to sound the way it should. I mean, more power isn't going to hurt, but less than that, 1.25 watts, you start losing a little bit of dynamics, especially in the bass. Okay, the Audio GD Master 9. That's my reference amp, and that just has unlimited power and can power anything, and this headphone sounds incredible on that amp. So if you got something like that, you're all set. The Emotiva, the A100 Bass X, I've tried it both ways, with the jumpers installed and with them out. Without the jumpers installed, that amp is only rated at 180 milliwatts into 32 ohms, and it definitely comes up short. Of all the amps, the Emotiva without the jumpers is definitely lacking power, and even though the headphone still sounds pretty decent, it really lacks in dynamics, and it's just obvious that the amp just isn't putting out enough power to, or enough current or whatever it is. It's just not driving the headphones the way they should. So on the low power, I would say no, not a good choice. It sounds decent, but not good. Okay, put the jumpers in, and now we've got a completely different amp. Now it's putting out 12 watts per channel into 32 ohms, and has unlimited clean power. And in my opinion, if you buy this headphone and you need a budget amp to power it, that is the way to go. The Emotiva with the jumpers in, it's not the best I've ever heard. I mean, it doesn't have the refinement, it doesn't have the detail, it doesn't have the sound quality of, say, the Audio GD Master 9 or the Wells Audio Milo, but it definitely has all the power you will ever need, and it'll take you 90% of the way there. So like I said, if you just spent $15.99 on this headphone, and you've only got a couple $100 left for an amp, that amp at $229 will provide all the power you need. It will sound great, and it'll take you 90% of the way there. I mean, it's not going to etch out every little detail in these headphones like, you know, a more expensive amp might, like the Wells Audio or the Audio GD, but it's going to do a great job. Okay, next on the list would be the Wells Audio Milo, and out of the 6 amps, in my opinion, that one did the best job of driving this headphone. It just sounded incredible. It had more than enough power. which, that amp is rated, oh, I forget, I think that amp is rated at like 10 watts per channel and 32 ohms, something like that. So unlimited power, never an issue. But there's something about that amp that just grabbed onto this headphone and just pulled out every detail, just made it sound great. Just, I would say even better than the Audio GD. It just gave it a more musical, just a better overall sound. Really liked it. So of all the amps I tried, if price isn't as much of a factor to you, I would really recommend you take a look at the Wells Audio Milo if you're using this headphone, or any of the higher end Hifiman headphones, because I've heard it works real well with the HE1000 V2 and also the Cispara. The Urza Tish Bacillus Tilia, which not a real high powered amp, a really nice sounding amp. It does a good job with this headphone. It sounds good, but it's a little lacking in the power to bring out really good dynamics in it. It sounds good, but that amp is better suited for efficient to medium efficiency headphones. This I would say is a little, on the harder to drive side, so not an ideal match, but it does sound good. I would say that's where it's at. It does a good job, but not as good as it could if it had a little more power. Then finally, I've had a couple weeks with the Felix Audio Echo, which is a tube amp. In fact, it's an OTL, output transformer-less tube amp. And just pretty much, they are not recommended for planar headphones. They just, especially an OTL tube amp, pretty much no one recommends them to drive planar headphones. They just don't put out enough current to drive them properly. But to my surprise, it actually did a really good job. Once again, it's slightly lacking in the dynamics and the punch, but not that much. I mean, not enough that you would probably never notice unless you compared it to, like the M9 or the Milo, something with a huge amount of power. Then you would notice a little bit of difference. You're going to notice a little more slam in the bass and all that. So pretty much the same with the Felix Audio Echo and the Urza Tish Bacillus Tilia. They both sound really good, but if you compare it directly to using the Audio GD or the Wells Audio Milo, you're going to notice a little bit of lack in the dynamics. But once again, it's going to take you 90% of the way there. So if that's an amp, if you've got something like that, and you get this headphone, you're still going to be in good shape. You might want to look at something else in the future that's going to bring out the very best that this headphone can. And in my opinion, both the Milo and the Master 9 both do that. Compared to the Sundara, which is a headphone I really like and highly recommend at the $500 price point, in my opinion, this headphone sounds very similar. The tone balance is very similar, but the bass definitely goes deeper. It's definitely got better sub bass than the Sundara. The treble, which I think is excellent on the Sundara, is just as good or better. So this headphone's a little bit harder to drive though than the Sundara, but in every way, I would say this headphone's a little bit better than the Sundara. Compared to the HE560, this has the same bass extension as the 560, but hits a little bit harder. Same thing with the Sundara. This has, you'd have to crank the bass up about probably 3 decibels on the Sundara to be at the same place you are with this. This has better treble than the 560, clearer, doesn't get harsh like the 560 can sometimes, especially if underpowered. Pretty much the same tone balance though, and once again just better in every way than the 560. Okay, those are both like a third the price of this, so like I said earlier, I was hoping to get a hold of a Sennheiser HD 800 or 800S to compare to this because it'd be in the same price range, but that didn't happen, so I'm going to have to compare it to what I have, and that would be the Kennerton Valley and the Kennerton Thror. The Valley sells at, I think, about $960 right now, so it's a little more than half the price of this headphone. And the Kennerton Thror, which is about, I think, 34 something in price right now, so it's pretty much double, maybe even slightly more than double the price of the Arya. So not really a fair comparison, but that's what I have to compare to right now, so I'll compare them. Let's start with the Thror. This headphone has a few advantages over the Thror, even though the Thror is twice the price. Number one, because it's made almost entirely of plastic, it is lighter and a little bit more comfortable than the Thror. Not saying the Thror is uncomfortable. In fact, I really like it, but I would say this pretty much beats out everything as far as comfort. This has a little bit more weight to the sub bass than the Thror does. The sub bass probably goes down just as low on the Thror, but this has got a little bit more weight to it where you'd have to give the Thror a couple decibels of boost to be in the same place. As far as the Thror, does it have advantages? Yeah, it's got some big advantages. The first would be the build and the materials. Okay, as far as I can tell, there's nothing wrong with the build quality of this headphone. Everything looks good, everything fits together well. Nothing's fallen apart in the 2 months I have, nothing feels loose. I mean, the build quality is good, but the materials, material-wise, the Thror just completely blows this away. I mean, the Thror is built with, first of all, not only does it use real wood, but it uses exotic woods. I mean, the one I have is made of Zebrano wood, wherever that comes from. The Thror uses aircraft aluminum, and the big difference is it's all the pads, the headband, everything's covered with lambskin leather. So, I mean, you know, there's no comparison between the two. But the trade-off is more weight, and, you know, but, you know, like I said, I mean, the Thror is twice the price, so you expect better build quality, and you get it. Sound-wise, I would say the Thror just it's a little bit more dynamic. Well, first of all, it's much more efficient. So the Thror can run with any amp, even the Echo, the Erzatish, whatever. It doesn't matter. The Thror is very easy to drive, so it actually takes a lot less amp than this headphone does. But sound-wise, I would say the Thror just has more richness in the mid-range. Where I really notice it is female vocals. And don't get me wrong, I mean, this headphone is great, and I would never be able to say this unless I compared it directly to the Thror, because I mean, when I listen to this, it sounds perfect. But if I compare it side by side, switch them back and forth with the Thror female vocals just have a richer, more textured sound to them, and more, a little more detail in the voices, and just sound more natural. So, you know, I've definitely got to give that to the Thror. Then as far as Soundstage, the Arya has a little bit wider Soundstage, not a lot of difference, but and the Arya has more height to the Soundstage, but without a doubt, the Thror has more depth to the Soundstage. The Thror, not only do I hear things way out in front of me, but I hear it in multiple layers, where I'm not really picking up on that. Even the width and the height. Okay, with the Arya, I'm hearing the Soundstage, I'm hearing it in my head, I'm hearing it like by my ear, and I'm hearing it way out here. But I'm not really hearing multiple layers, where with the Thror, I'm hearing several different layers of width, I'm hearing several different layers of depth, and it just gives it a much more three-dimensional kind of holographic sound. And so because of that, I mean, you know, without a doubt, the Thrower is my favorite headphone of the two, but once again, the Thrower costs twice as much. So, you know, that's a big decision to make, you know, what you want. Like I said, the Thrower is, you know, pretty much my reference headphone, and, you know, the fact that this holds up to it in many ways at half the price is actually, you know, saying a lot about this headphone. Would I trade this for the Thrower? No. But, you know, like I said, the Thrower is just, you know, kind of on the next level, a more fair comparison. And I would really like to make the comparison someday. I'd really like to get to hear the HE1000 SE, which is a $3,500 headphone from Hifiman. And that would probably be a very fair and very competitive comparison to the Thrower, so I'm hoping to get to do that someday. The Valley, which sells for $960, which is a little less than half of the price of the Arya. Once again, build quality, it kind of walks all over the Arya. It's made of real wood, aircraft aluminum, magnesium. It's got real leather headbands and all that. But the trade-off is a lot more weight. I think it's about 60 grams. No, I think it's about 100 grams heavier than the Arya, and not as comfortable. You know, it's never been an issue to me. I've never had a problem with comfort on the Valley, but some people have complained about it. I mean, the thing's built like a Russian tank, and, you know, some people just, that's a problem for them. Weight has never really been an issue to me. I guess I have sort of a thick neck, and, you know, heavy headphone doesn't bother me, but no doubt about it. I mean, the Arya has, you know, is lighter and more comfortable than the Valley. Sound-wise, the Arya's got a bigger Soundstage. It's got better extension up on the high end. It's got a little bit more detail, better resolution. The Valley at first sounded slightly veiled to me up in the upper mid-range, but over time, and I've had it, I don't know, almost a year now, and that's cleared up really well. So it is a very well-detailed headphone, but I would say this is slightly more detailed. The Valley, though, does have an advantage. It's being a dynamic driver. It's got, the sound is just, everything is harder hitting. It's a more dynamic headphone. First of all, it's super efficient. You can drive the Valley with anything. But the Valley has more punch and more dynamics, especially in the mid-bass. So for music like electronic, dance music, rock, I actually prefer the Valley because it's got just harder hit, more punch. And in fact, the Valley has the best bass of any headphone I've heard, the highest quality bass, not the most bass, but just the perfect balance of slam and punch in the bass, really tight, and very detailed and textured bass. So saying that it's better than this is not criticizing this at all. I really, really like the bass in this headphone. It's just not quite as good as the Valley, but this beats the Valley out in a lot of other ways. But once again, not exactly a fair price comparison because this is almost twice the price of the Valley. As far as the price of this at $15.99, it's got some pretty tough competition out there. So, you know, whether or not this is the best headphone at that price, I can't tell you because I haven't heard the others. I mean, some of its toughest competitors are going to be the Sennheiser HD 800S, which is in the similar price range. The Focal Clear, which is a very popular headphone and falls in about the same price range. The ZMF makes a couple of headphones that are supposed to be really good that are going to be in this same price range too. So, you know, it does have some competition. So I can't tell you if it's, you know, the best choice at this price range because I haven't tried the others. You know, hopefully one day I will be able to, and then maybe give you a comparison. The good and the bad. I've only got a few very minor criticisms of this headphone. One is the cable, which is only about 5 feet long, and obviously not made for portable use with a 1/4 inch plug. So for desktop use, I would prefer the cable to be about 7 feet long. That's my favorite length. I don't like them longer than that because it's too easy for them to hang down to the floor and accidentally step on the cable. But 5 feet's a little bit short to me. If my amp is on a desk and I want to put my feet up and, you know, kind of sit back in my chair, I can run out of cable length. The only other criticism I would have of this headphone, the only weakness, and it's not that big a deal, but it's what sets the Kennerton's Roar ahead of it, is it lacks a little bit of depth to the Soundstage and a little bit of three-dimensional sound. Other than that, I can't find any weaknesses with this headphone. It does need a little bit of power behind it. Like I said, I'd recommend about at least 1 watt per channel into 32 ohms to drive this headphone properly. Great extension at both ends. Perfect tone balance in my opinion. No need for an EQ. Unless you're a bass head, I can't really see. You know, the treble's great all the way through. So, I mean, only a diehard bass head I think is going to require more bass out of this headphone. Great clarity, resolution, detail. Very light, very comfortable. That's it. It works with pretty much any kind of music. The Kennerton's Roar I think is better for orchestral and acoustical music. It's able to bring out a little more detail, and especially like a concert, I can pick out, you know, the location of the different instruments a little bit better. But like I said, that's a $3,400 headphone. That's a top shelf headphone, and the fact that this is even, you know, competing with it is great at half the price. Like I said, just everything about this headphone I like, and I can definitely recommend it. You know, like I said, I haven't heard all the other headphones in the price range, but I have no problem recommending this headphone. Excellent in every way. Yeah, I can recommend this as a really good overall does everything headphone. No matter what kind of music you listen to, you know, it doesn't matter. This headphone does well with everything. So just as far as a very well balanced headphone, if I had to own just one headphone, I'd be very tempted to make this my one headphone because it just, you know, it works with everything. It sounds good with any kind of music. It's a little bit amp sensitive, so I mean, if you've got an amp that puts out enough power, it's gonna work. And like I said, and it's so comfortable you can wear it for hours. So if you're into long-term listening, yeah, this is a great headphone. So yes, I highly recommend this headphone. So I'm going to wrap this video up. It's gotten pretty long, and once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and also I'm the administrator over at the Headphone Experience on Facebook. So you're all welcome to join us over there. And also I wanted to mention, I just started up another review channel where I'm reviewing pretty much, it's a product and service review channel where I'm reviewing everything pretty much except headphones and headphone amps and things like that. Just started it, and I don't think I have any subscribers yet. I just started it up today, this morning, so got a couple of videos on there, so check that out. It's William Murdoch, Product and Service Reviews. So anyway, thank you for watching my video, and if this has helped you with your decision, please give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do. Thank you.